Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, welcome back to another edition of the Atlanta Sports Guys here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ, up there in Washington, D.C. right now. Max Marcovitch. I was going to say Maxwell Marcovitch, but I'm just going to do Max Marcovitch, a Padea Python legend, Michigan legend, all champs all the time for Max Marcovitch. Congratulations on the national title a few weeks back. But Max, good evening. How are you?
Thank you. Yes, I have not been here since being crowned a national champion. And fittingly, I believe we're going to talk about at least two Michigan men on this podcast.
We are. Is it? But is there part of you that's like, seeing what's happening to Alabama the last week, you're like, that looming departure, or maybe you're like, well, it's gonna be Sharon Moore and then we'll keep a lot of the guys, or are you just dreading the inevitable big portal launch?
Okay. I'm completely at peace with it. The thing is, like, each of the last 4 years, I've had to go through this mental exercise anyway, so it's kind of like, if there's ever a time to do it, it might as well be right after a natty. I've given myself a 5-year grace period of I'm not going to get mad about anything.
Yeah.
If we get gutted and we stink for a few years, that's okay. We won. It's all good.
I like the attitude. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe he's coaching the Atlanta Falcons, and I feel like that's the best of both worlds for you. If he does wind up in Atlanta after winning a national title at Michigan, you're like, hey, that's awesome. I enjoy the Harbaugh experience. Is that your number one pick right now? Because we're talking Falcons head coaching search and then little DeJounte Murray. Is Harbaugh number one on your coaching wish list for the Falcons?
I think he would be the best hire.
Okay.
For me personally, it would be a very conflicted emotion. But I think he would be the best hire, and I'm going to make the case for Mike Macdonald later, or in a bit, I guess. But
I'm noticing a trend here.
Well, I have other guys. I mean, I would love to hire Ben Johnson. I don't think they're going to hire Ben Johnson. But
I don't think they're hiring Ben Johnson either, but we'll get to
that. Jim Harbaugh isn't just what Jim Harbaugh brings, and I have followed many a Jim Harbaugh team. It's that he brings with him the next version of Mike Macdonald and Jesse Minter. He knows everybody in the league. He's going to hire a good offensive coordinator. He's going to have one of the better staffs in the league immediately. And if you hire one of these young coordinators, you don't get that. And so there's less of the unknown. But with Jim Harbaugh, especially in the past few years, he's really evolved as a coach, and as he's contrary to popular belief about him, he's super open-minded. He is constantly changing. He's adapting to his team. He's adapting to his fellow coaches. After 2020, I think, when Michigan went 2-4, and he had his salary cut in half, he completely overhauled the staff, went super young, found guys who he had never worked with, never knew. He's not a Belichick type in this way. And so I think when you're talking to me about the difference between a Belichick hire, and I'm sure we'll get into that, and a Harbaugh hire, Harbaugh is, first of all, 10 years younger, and second of all, super adaptable, and I think has adapted really well to modern college football. His primary task at Michigan was okay, how do we beat Ohio State? Ryan Day runs an NFL offense, and a really good one. And so he had to dip into the NFL well to do that, and he got these two. Granted, they worked with his brother, so that's helpful. Two young defensive coordinators who were rising through the ranks of the Ravens system. Mike Macdonald had started at Georgia, by the way, went to Centennial High School, and that's how he broke through. It was by hiring these two 30-something, really young guys who were, underqualified for the position, I guess, but that was the best trait he has, I guess, is his hiring. And the second best trait he has is his team building. I haven't seen a team at Michigan that hasn't, COVID year aside, that hasn't gotten the most out of its talent. And I think, it could be a short burn in terms of he's a weird dude, and he, can wear on people pretty quick. And I don't know how that would work with Blank. I don't know how that would work with McKay, dear God. But I think be really good and win a lot of games really quickly. And I think that like there's more of a long-term vision there to me there than with Belichick. I don't know how you feel about Harbaugh, Belichick, Vrabel type.
So we've talked about it in the group chat. I mean, I think I'm ruining y'all's day by me just throwing out there. I don't know if it's me being cautiously, not even just it wouldn't be cautiously optimistic. It's more of like reading the tea leaves, and it's almost like it depends on who you trust, like who you're reading and sources and stuff like that to develop where you think this search is ultimately going to wind up. But my gut just tells me there's something to the job preservation mode from Rich McKay and Terry Fontenot that Harbaugh, who dealt with a bunch of stuff with Trent Baalke in San Francisco, part of the reason that relationship and he was not the long-term guy there was because of that GM coach relationship. And when he's been in college, he's been the de facto GM. He has that personnel control, and that I'm going to guess wherever he winds up, he's going to be the final decision maker or have a very, very strong influence on final decisions that the team makes. And then I think the same is true for Bill, where I think you're running into a wall where, like, yeah, it's cool that they're interviewing multiple times with Arthur Blank and this, that, and the other, but the impasse is still the impasse, which is Arthur Blank's a very loyal guy. Rich McKay is part of the conversation. Rich McKay is going to be part of the conversation. Terry Fontenot is a huge, just unclear situation at GM right now. Is he a lame duck GM? Is like, what is the path there? So I'm sure that there's probably not a straight answer on that front when they're doing these interviews as to what the future might hold for Terry. And is he a part of it? Are you going to be allowed to bring in your own guy? It's a weird process. It started off weird with Terry not being there in that opening press conference. I just think those established big names are going to look at the Falcons job and they're like, hey, we appreciate it. We like Arthur Blank. We like the potential. We like the skill position guys. We like the offensive line. We like the leap the defense made this past year. But yeah, this isn't what we ultimately want. And I think it's going to be kind of embarrassing because so much has been just been obsessed with Bill and Jim, and it just seems like a foregone conclusion that one of the two will wind up here. Maybe I'll end up looking foolish and they'll hire Bill tonight or tomorrow, or whatever, or Jim. But to me, this screams of the big names say no. And we've seen this before. Like Mike Smith wasn't calling plays when he was hired as the head coach many years ago for the Atlanta Falcons. And it wasn't like this big, sexy name, but like Arthur Blank he was big fish hunting early. He big fish hunts a lot during these coaching searches. And what we've seen is like, that's not where they've gone. Like Dan Quinn was a relative unknown. He was not a big, he wasn't a coordinator. I think he was 1 year for Seattle as a defensive coordinator before he got the job with the Falcons. Mike Smith wasn't even, he was the DC at Jacksonville, but he wasn't calling plays. My gut just tells me it's going to be one of those kind of names, is that this winds up being, whether it's Brian Johnson in Philadelphia, which is my leader in the clubhouse based on how this search is going. I think Ben says no, based on where we're at right now. I think my gut says he winds up in Washington with Peters. I think that's where he takes the job. And then I just think the Falcons might suddenly be the worst job available because Dan Morgan gets the Panthers job, right? As the GM, and he's like a hero, that kind of thing. But you have a number 1 overall pick in Bryce Young, who the right coach might like him a lot. And that makes it a little bit more appetizing to me, potentially, is that I understand the ownership part of it with Tepper and everything else, but they're also desperate enough and rich enough that Tepper just being like, I'll give you full control, I'll do this, that, and the other. Like, and also you have this quarterback in Bryce Young, who by all accounts still has a lot of potential upside. The right coach might see something in Bryce where they're like, oh yeah, I can do something there. The Falcons is still a huge unknown. They're at number 8. Like, they're not in a position to draft a franchise quarterback right now at that spot. You'll have to trade up. You'll have to go up some assets to get in that top 3, where I think it's going to take to get one of the quarterbacks you really want in the 2024 draft. All of this screams to me is it's going to be, yes man might be too strong, but I just think it's going to be a coordinator that is willing to do this weird group collaborative Rich McKay, Terry Fontenot effort. That's my gut.
I how about this? Let me give you the optimist take. Because I mean, I've gone back and forth here too. I think I think McKay's too involved. I don't really know why his position exists. I don't know how he sort of maneuvered his way into this spot after essentially being fired as a GM several years ago at this point. But let me give you the optimist
It's
take.
like Billy Knight coming back into the fold in Atlanta, or Rod Higgins, or something like that, where you're just like, how? Wait, what? They're running the franchise now? Wait, what?
Let me give you the optimist take here. I was concerned. First of all, the Falcons are running an extremely wide-ranging search at this point. I think we can agree on that. They have interviewed everyone from Belichick to Jiro Evero, Ben Johnson,
Brian Johnson,
and
Aaron
everyone.
Glenn.
And it seems like they're going to do second interviews with a lot of those guys. So they are not. I think at first I was concerned they were all in on Belichick mode or bust. They were going to sort of acquiesce to whatever Belichick wanted, and I don't want to acquiesce to whatever Belichick wants because that leaves you where the Patriots are at this point. I don't think you can bring in Bill Belichick and let him do everything he was doing in New England, and I don't think they're going to. The optimist take is everything is in flux. And blank is ultimately going to make the best decision among that vast pool of candidates, which, by the way, the only open job now that everyone is interviewing for. I don't think you're not going to see Belichick, Vrabel, Harbaugh interview for every job, right? They're all interviewing for the Falcons job because the Falcons roster compared to these other openings is better. The Falcons division is weaker. There are assets to work with. I think that the optimist take on why things are sort of in flux in terms of defining what Fontenot is going to do, defining what McKay's going to do, is blank is going to make the best decision for the franchise and then figure out the dominoes from there, right? If he really likes, let's just say Ben Johnson is open to this job and he really likes Ben Johnson. Well, he can say, all right, Ben Johnson is going to come in here and do essentially what Arthur Smith would have, the same role Arthur Smith had, but just be a better coach, right? And I don't think they're going to do that because I don't think they want to do the Arthur Smith thing again, but maybe. Let's say that he thinks it is Belichick in the end, right? And he says, you know what? We need Bill Belichick. Sorry, Rich McKay, you're kicking back over out of football personnel, and eventually we'll sort of, move on because I'm going to make the hard decision here that is best for the organization. Let's say it's Harbaugh and it's the same thing. I think that it's ultimately going to be up to blank, and then they will figure everything else out. Now, if that results in Terry Fontenot being gone, which I don't see, I don't see him being gone. I what his role will be in a Belichick, Harbaugh, Vrabel situation is weird, but those guys are going to want someone to lean on for the draft, and ultimately they can say that they'll override it, but that's I don't think he'll be gone. I think McKay is the big question. And I think that you and I stand in a certain position there, and I think most Falcons fans have a certain position there. But you can't really nail this stuff down until you have the guy. And what you're encouraged by is how wide-ranging of a search they're running. And that's just what you can hope for at this stage with the limited information we're working with, and then we'll see where it goes. I don't think this thing's ending in the next week. I don't think it is. I mean, they're bringing in of what we know, at least 6 more guys for second interviews. They're not going to make this hire tonight, tomorrow, Wednesday. Vrabel's coming in Wednesday. They're not going to just cancel that.
Yeah. Well, I guess part of what might change how this goes is other jobs filling up, right? I think that's something is the Panthers and Seahawks, Titans, and Commanders, if those all fill up pretty quickly, then some of those names are going to pop out for second interviews, and suddenly your pool is going to shrink. And do the Falcons panic if there's a run on some of those guys where they're like, uh-oh, we have to make a choice, or this guy's going to get swooped up by Team X?
The flip side of that is some of these guys can't be hired yet. Ben Johnson, Mike Macdonald. To me, the 2 best coordinators on the job market are Ben Johnson and Mike Macdonald. If you're going to
explain the Mike Macdonald thing to me. Why, as a Michigan guy and a Raven, and the Ravens have obviously been elite on defense this year, but for Falcons fans who might not be immediately enthused by that kind of hire, why would you be enthused by Mike Macdonald?
Yeah, I understand not being enthused because you didn't know his name a year ago, right? Well, let me give a little bit of background on Mike Macdonald. He is, I think, he's a coach in the NFL. I want to say he's 31, 32.
Mm.
He started his career at Georgia. He went to Centennial High School. Started his career at UGA under Mark Richt as a student. He was a student, whatever, grad
Mm.
assistant, something like that. Talked his way
Right.
onto the staff. They loved him. They kept him as long as possible. In 2013, he gets hired by the Ravens. And he works his way up with the Ravens. He starts as an intern, goes to quality control to all the way up to linebackers eventually. And he is being groomed as the next Ravens guy. Like the Ravens are known as having a really good pipeline of young defensive coaches. And he was the next guy. And so Jim Harbaugh, as the story goes to John in 2020 and says, I need someone to fix this defense. Like, who do you have? I need an NFL guy. Who do you have? And he said, you got two names, Mike Macdonald and Jesse Minter. Here you go. To that point, Mike Macdonald had been, I think, linebackers coach with the Ravens. He picks Macdonald and truly runs one of the most complex schemes I've ever seen in college football. And beats Ohio State for the first time in 18 or second time in 18 years. He's a cult hero, but it was always sort of known that like he's an NFL guy. He's going to go back to the NFL. And it was like, all right. And they fire Wink Martindale, who had been a very, very successful defensive coordinator with the Ravens for a long time. Like John Harbaugh got a lot of heat for that. They fire Wink Martindale because they're like, I think we need a younger, fresher mind there. And we have one, and it's Mike Macdonald. And as we talk about all of these offensive coaches, like the Ben Johnsons and the Slowicks and the guys who are already head coaches, the Shanahans and McDaniels, you go through the Ravens the last 2 years, like they have stopped all of them. They've shut down all of them. He is, I think, the number one thing you look for when you're hiring a coordinator, I think, is like, is this guy adaptable? And they have adapted to stop every type of offense you possibly need. And so to me, it's like if this guy was coaching offense, we'd be talking about him as the number one candidate, like with a bullet. He coaches the best defense in the NFL. He's been endorsed by one guy who has had success as an NFL head coach, and one guy who might be the best NFL head coach in the league right now. He's from the area. He came up at UGA. And I don't know if he's a Falcons fan. That's kind of irrelevant. But like, I think he's like borderline a genius. And like, you're going to hear a lot more about him in the next few weeks. And I think that excitement would grow because I think they're going to go to the Super Bowl. I think they're probably going to win the Super Bowl. And I think it's like, I think it is a sexy hire. Like, this is like you putting the chips on like, this guy's a genius. And there are things we don't know, right? I don't know what kind of leader he is. I don't know what his network would be like. I don't know who he'd hire as offensive coordinator. Like, I don't know those things. And that's why I sort of defer more to the like Harbaugh, Vrabel mold than the coordinator. But if you're going coordinator route, to me, it's him or Ben Johnson.
I think that's fine. I think I'd be okay. And also the staffs that he's been around, right? Harbaugh, I mean, whichever Harbaugh you want to say, like it's a pro style staff. It's had a lot of different kinds of minds. I think he'd hire well on the offensive side of the ball. That's what you worry about when you hire a defensive minded coach in today's sport. Because if you look at the final, Dan Campbell, tight ends, offensive guy, Kyle Shanahan, offensive guy, obviously. Then on the you have Andy Reid, offensive guy, John Harbaugh. I guess he's all over the place, but I guess we'll say just I don't know what to call him.
Coach before,
but he was special teams. He was defensive backs. I think he might have been receivers. I don't know. He's had a lot, maybe running backs. He was something on offense too. He's done a lot of different roles. So I don't really know what to call him. But either way, you got to be careful. I think so much. The margin for error is thinner for defensive minded coaches in the sport because you can see it. You hire the right guy and you're like, oh, awesome, we're rolling. And then that guy leaves and you're like, uh-oh. And you're asking the defensive minded guy. You see Todd Bowles has looked better this year because he nailed the hire from Seattle, where he brings in the QB coach who launched Geno Smith's comeback of the year campaign last year. He hires him to be his OC this year. They take off. Great. Dan Campbell, he still needed Ben Johnson. We're about to see how much of this is Dan Campbell and the culture, but he's going to have to hire well all over again. I don't know. That's the one worry is just, can he hire multiple offensive coordinators well in succession? Because I just think the margin for error in the NFL is so slim on that regard.
I think that's like totally valid. And I agree. On balance, I would much prefer to hire an offensive coach. But like you're kind of working with the pool you're working with right now. Like who are those guys out there? You know, I don't think Slowick is ready, to be honest.
No.
Like, I don't think I would hire Slowick, and so then it's Ben Johnson, right? I mean, who like?
Well, you know who I would probably do, who's the best in the middle ground, and I think would actually work with Terry, and there's obviously a connection there, and he's in the right staff. Speaking of Detroit, Aaron Glenn, I don't think would be a bad hire. And the way people talk about him, I think Aaron Glenn is fine. I mean, that probably means Pete Carmichael is the new OC for the Falcons because they laid off that whole offensive staff in New Orleans this offseason. Look, that might be the middle ground. Okay, maybe. I don't know. That's my gut is like the middle. I would not be surprised if it's Aaron Glenn.
What's the case for Aaron? Like, I'm sure Aaron Glenn interviews well, and I'm sure he's sort of I'm sure he's an enticing like leader to be around. I'm not impressed by that defense.
Not a lot of talent in the back end. I mean, Camson's QB1. Shout out to Cam, BFL. But I think, the defensive line's developed well. They've got good linebacker play. Branch has played really well as a rookie for Detroit. I think it'd be a fine hire. Like, I think if you're doing that, Brian Johnson would be a disaster where the city might revolt and we have a Mike Elko, Mark Stoops situation at Texas A&M if that were the case. But I don't know. In terms of like safe, I think Aaron Glenn is like okay, maybe. And then there's like the Raheem Morris, which is like the guy who has been in a room multiple times, waiting for the opportunity, the ultimate CEO coach, right? Kind of like the Harbaugh. Like the best case scenario for Raheem, I think, is Harbaugh, where he's coached different positions. He's been on a lot of elite staffs. He's obviously been with maybe the best culture setter of the last 4 years in Sean McVay, and who's lost so much brain drain and hasn't really missed a beat and overachieving with really, really limited rosters. Especially this past year, making the playoffs with just how old and how just depleted they were on both sides of the ball was extremely impressive. You could sell me on Raheem Morris too, which is like, I think he'd hire well, and I think he would be a good CEO coach potentially.
I'd be in on Raheem Morris. I think that's like what you said. I think he'd be a CEO. He's worked offense, he's worked defense. I think he'd probably call the defensive plays, but whatever. And he has the connections with Shanahan and endorsements of Shanahan.
Yes.
Like you nailed it on the head. If you're hiring a CEO or a DC, you have to like have confidence that they would be able to hire, a good offensive coordinator. And I have complete faith he would. I think we've kind of danced around it, and I think we should have the full like Belichick talk. I think I've gone in a few different directions on this over the last few weeks. And I want to know where you net out.
The thing that scares me the most about Bill right now, early 70s, we just saw Pete Carroll and Nick Saban eject here. He's obviously like still looking to beat the record, beat Shula. He loves coaching, clearly. He wants to stay around. We don't know for certain. This is what's tough, is we don't know how much control he really still wants in a franchise. Like, that's just, we're never going to get that, like, until he's hired and we see what kind of front office situation that they put together for him. But I think the thing that scares me the most about Bill here is it's not the defense. I think the defense will be really good right away. I think that's like with the pieces that we had and the strides we made. Shout out to Ryan Nielsen. We'll miss you. Of course, we get a great DC, and then immediately he's gone, and he's probably going to do great things for the Jaguars. But I think the defense would be solid. Like, I think immediately the Falcons would have top 15, top 10 defensive DVOA next year with the pieces they have. So that would be exciting. It would raise the floor there. The problem is we just saw what Bill looked like without a quarterback the last couple of years. We just saw how ugly it can be in that regard. And we've done 3 years of really, really ugly offenses. And if he doesn't nail that, and because it's going to be really hard for the Falcons to navigate this, I mean, maybe it is simply just Kirk Cousins likes Bill. He's a free agent. You just bring him in, and then you can draft a quarterback to sit behind Kirk for a couple of years, and it's all seamless. Like, that's the best case scenario, I think, is you don't have to pay a premium or you trade for Kirk Cousins. You can just sign him outright. I don't like the Russell Wilson idea where you have to trade for Russell Wilson or anything like that's no, that needs to be absolutely off the table. But that's like the best case scenario. But I'm just like, that's a lot of things that have to happen and to make me feel okay with Bill Belichick. And I think there's a lot of scenarios where you hire Bill, he doesn't get the quarterback. Maybe he sees something in, or maybe he's like, you know what, let's bring Mac Jones into this one. Maybe like there's just something where I'm like, I don't know for sure that the quarterback stuff would be solved. I don't know for sure the offense would be much better than what we've seen the last 3 years. I mean, I think the defense is a
It's also,
guarantee, but the offense, I
yeah,
don't know.
it's also it highly limits your options at quarterback.
Yeah,
Like Bill's not signing up for a rookie, right?
that's true.
So what are your options? You know, Kirk Cousins is probably the best of the veteran options that are reasonably available this offseason. He's coming off an Achilles?
Achilles. Yeah.
36, however old he is, torn Achilles. Like I'm like I'm apprehensive about that.
Mhm.
And I think where I've netted out is like you hire Bill and the range of outcomes is very small to me.
Mm.
I don't see it bottoming out. I think there's too much talent on the roster, and I think what you said, like the defense is gonna be really good
Mm.
with Bill. What is the ceiling though? Like let's say you bring in Kirk Cousins, you pay him, 2 years, whatever, 60 to 70 million, probably more honestly, but
Mm.
like that's your cap space for the most part. You make a few more moves, you bring in a draft pick. Like, what is the ceiling of a Josh McDaniels offense with Kirk Cousins and like yeah, maybe you win the NFC South, maybe Bill gets his wins and gets his record, but like that's not that's not a real contender. And so this is
No.
what like my fear was when the early reports were like, oh, it's Bill, it's done.
Mm.
I had a fear that could still be true. I don't know. That blank was sort of like steamrolling. Like, this is the guy. We need Bill Belichick. He's the GOAT. Like, I need a Super Bowl. I'm 82. This has to happen. It has to be done without sort of like seeing the bigger picture and seeing where this franchise is at, which is we all watch this team this year. They are not on the verge of a Super Bowl here. This is
Mm.
not the Cowboys firing McCarthy to get, to take that next step. The roster's not there yet. You have to be patient in your build. I think we both agree that like the team can win the division next year almost regardless of who they hire.
Mm.
And I guess that's highly dependent on the quarterback position. But like to be a Super Bowl contender, you have to continue this build. You can't
Mhm.
expedite it. And I think Bill is the like, screw it, I'm 82 and I got to win the Super Bowl. Like, let's hire the GOAT. And like
Mm.
that was what worried me. So taking this like break and like making sure it's a deliberate like process, making sure that you don't just like acquiesce to all of his demands, I think is important. I will be highly skeptical of a Bill Belichick hire no matter what. But yeah, this will be really good, right?
Yeah, I just still don't think it's going to happen. What do you think? What is your gut? We're
Well,
taping this late on a Monday. Like, do you think it happens or no?
I think
Clairvoyant Max.
my gut is it happens. But here's the thing, like Bill Belichick wants to coach next year. He hasn't interviewed anywhere else. He doesn't even, we don't even have reports that he's talked anywhere else.
He could also sit out.
But like, if his whole goal is to break the wins record,
Yeah.
he can't really afford to like sit out.
Well, he
Like,
could sit out 1 year because there's the team that is not extending the contract of a certain coach, and he is a lame duck final year of his contract, and they walk right in.
what happened? Wouldn't they have just fired him and done it now? Like, what?
I don't know.
I just think like if his whole goal was to win, I forget how 20 more games, 20.
No, it's like 14 or 15.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
If his whole goal is to win 14 or 15 more games, either retire and just say it's not going to happen, or like you kind of got to jump back in. Like, you're
Mhm.
72, you can't really like if you're apprehensive about hiring a 72-year-old coach, you're going to be apprehensive about hiring a 73-year-old coach. You know, like you're not Sean McVay or someone who could take a year. And he hasn't talked to anyone else. And we saw this report of like, I saw a report, I think it was yesterday from, I want to say it was Florio.
Mm.
Like, there are a couple teams interested in talking to Bill, one who has fired their coach and one who hasn't. And it's like, that just feels like someone like trying to give Belichick more leverage with the Falcons. Like, if you're interested in talking to Bill, go talk to him. You know, like, I don't understand why that's like, it just feels like sort of half-hearted leverage. And so my thought now is that Bill needs the Falcons more than the Falcons need Bill. And
Huh.
I hope if that's the case, that they are using this sort of extensive search as leverage to say like, hey man, like we're not just gonna like bend over here to everything you need. This is the offer. We're gonna pay you a boatload of money. You're not gonna get full control. Terry Fontenot will be here. You guys will work together. And if you're not, you can bring Josh McDaniels, you can whatever. If you're not gonna do that, then by all means, we'll hire. Hey, we can hire Jim Harbaugh. Hey, we can hire Ben Johnson. I think that's where this is at. And if that's the case, I am glad they're doing it that way. I still will be skeptical, but I think I think that's where this is at. Until we see Belichick interviews for the Chargers job, Belichick interviews until we see that, I'm not going to believe anything else.
I'm going down with I think both say no, and there's a lot of public backlash to both and not ending up in Atlanta. And then I think it's either Aaron Glenn or I'll say Aaron Glenn or Raheem Morris. I think it's one of the two. I don't think Brian Johnson can happen. Like, I think that was just one. Like, that's like a doomsday scenario. I don't think that will happen. But I do think it's going to be one of the ones that just is going to, who could end up working out. Let's be clear. Raheem Morris and Aaron Glenn could work out here. A lot of it just, you got to find the quarterback in the next year or two. Like, you just have to. Like, so much of this is just, what do the Falcons do to clean up the most important position in the sport? Like, it doesn't matter really who the coach is between Aaron Glenn, Raheem Morris, Bill Belichick, Jim Harbaugh. If they get quarterback wrong this offseason, like it just doesn't matter. Like there's only so much a good coach can do in this regard. So I'm just going to say right now, Raheem Morris or Aaron Glenn will be the next coach of the Falcons.
Quickly, what is your preferred outcome at quarterback?
I would trade up to in the top three. I don't care. Figure out who you like the most in the top three and trade up to one of those spots.
Yeah, I think that's, if you had to rank my like preferences, that would be number one. And number two would be sign a vet and then pair him with one of the sort of like late first.
I think you can still sign a vet and trade up is my thing. Is you can sign a vet and also trade up. That's what you could do with Kirk Cousins. You could sign Kirk and still trade up.
But that's like, I mean, I'm not opposed to that. That is like an exorbitant number of reasons. Like to trade up.
I don't care. But like, how many more years, Max, do we have to do with this with the quarterback stuff?
I'm with you. I just think if you trade up to the top three, you can't then also spend $35 million against the cap on Kirk Cousins.
That's true. It wouldn't be Kirk, but I'm just saying, like, you can get a veteran guy. Like, I don't know who it is, like, but you can do something like that. The worst situation is they trade for like Fields or Russell Wilson or who. Like, I will lose my mind if they make a trade and give up assets for a failed first rounder, an old vet who doesn't have it anymore. Like, that might send me over the edge. But I just think, Max, you know this, I know this. What has been the most successful run in Atlanta Falcons history? What was the key ingredient of that successful run?
100%.
And where was Matt Ryan taken?
He was taken third overall behind the
third
Longs.
Overall. Like, it's just, don't overthink this. Like, just trade up, figure out who you like the most, take a quarterback in the top three, and then let's roll.
This is the problem with the Belichick. We can talk in circles, but Belichick, Harbaugh, Vrabel, like they're not going to sign up for that.
Mm-hmm. Then sorry, that's where we're at. We need to take a quarterback in the top three and then figure it out.
I don't think the blank McKay like duo or whatever is. I think their preference is going to be veteran coach over rookie quarterback. Like if you had full faith in your GM, you would allow your GM to make the swing up to the top three.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, we also have to say this like requires someone in the top three to be willing to trade, and I don't really know which of the three it's going to be.
Well, I think there's possibilities. I mean, number 1 might be available. Like, they might be like, we want to keep Justin Fields, and
I think they're taking
I don't
Caleb.
know.
We'll see.
Would it surprise you if the Bears traded number 1 back-to-back years?
Yeah. It
Okay.
would surprise me at this point if they didn't take Caleb.
Also, it also depends on the new regimes, because look at this. You have Gerard Mayo in New England now. He might like Mac Jones and might want to keep this moving. So then they move out. You got to look at Sam Howell in Washington. You got to see what the new coach, whoever Washington brings in, and Adam Peters, the new GM. Do they like the quarterbacks enough to stay at 3, or do they trade back and they're like, we're not close enough because look, the Eagles are here, the Cowboys are here. We're going to scale back a little bit and get a quarterback next year or something. Like, we don't know internally what those organizations are thinking with the quarterback spot, because if you are one of those 3 teams and you don't want to or don't plan to take a quarterback in one of those 3 spots, you have to trade out. So we don't know yet. I think one of those 3 teams will be open to, like, I don't think it's gonna be chalk 1 through 3. They all 3 take quarterbacks is my gut.
Yeah, maybe. If you made me bet today, I would say it is chalk.
Okay. I just don't think so.
If you're Washington, you're not, and you're a new regime, you're not beholden to the Sam Howell draft
Yeah.
pick. Like, there's nothing. I would be stunned.
But what I'm saying is, like, those organizations can still look at this and go, we're still not a quarterback away. We don't want to burn the rookie clock because our roster is still not close to really realistically competing. So let's just beef up the rest of the roster. I mean, the Falcons just did that the last couple of years. They beefed up the roster around the quarterback and then waited.
And I think that there's absolutely something to be said for, like, at some point you just have to, like, take the plunge, you know?
Yep.
Like, the Falcons could have taken the plunge last year on CJ Stroud. We'd be having a whole different conversation. They could have got up to 2 and got him if they really wanted. And they waited. They kept waiting. They waited, and look where it got him, got him fired.
They also bet on a 3rd-round quarterback, and 3rd-round quarterbacks, generally speaking, don't work out. And that's why Arthur Smith is not coaching this team anymore. They rarely work out. It's just a numbers game. It's just like, what's the best odds? Taking a quarterback at number 3 and trading up, or taking a quarterback in the 2nd round or 3rd round? Like, it's just the better choice is in the top 3. Give up the assets and find the franchise quarterback and do that and just see what happens. I think every Falcons fan would be okay if they traded up in the top 3 and that guy didn't end up working out, because then it's like, hey, we took a big swing and we actually addressed the quarterback position the best way you can in the NFL. This is the best way to address long-term stability at the quarterback position, is trade up or just draft in the top 3. That is the best way to do this.
To me, it's a bigger question of whether those picks are available than whether they should. I think if it's there, do it. Make the Julio trade, just do it.
Also, you could just package Pitts. There's people to package here.
Yeah. I don't think that's the route they're going to go. But
no, I don't either. I think Pitts is just going to get not released. I just don't think his option is going to get picked up after this year. I think this is his last year in Atlanta, and that's it.
That's a deeper conversation.
It's a deep cut. We'll leave it there, Max Marcovitch. This was good. A good Atlanta Falcons hot stove of a Major League Baseball term here, but either way, it's interesting. We'll see what happens. Your final prediction, Bill Belichick. My final prediction, I'm kind of cheating, but I'm just saying
you gotta pick
Aaron Glenn / Raheem Morris. I'll just say Raheem, because it's only fair I do one. I'm going to say Raheem Morris is the coach of the Atlanta Falcons.
My last question is, by this time next Monday, is there a new Falcons head coach?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think this draws out. I think you're going to... Do you see Titans just filled while we're recording?
No, who'd they hire?
Callahan, the Bengals.
It's interesting. They didn't even let him get to Atlanta. Callahan was a hot name. Okay,
that's what I'm saying. I just think it's going to... I think these teams are going to get nervous.
I think you're right. Okay. I did not see that. That's I was doing some backroom intel with my Ravens fan friend on the Cincy offense, just to get a sense of Callahan. He seems interesting. That's a good hire.
Fine. We'll see. You can never go wrong. Like, I'm never going to tell an organization, like, what are you doing getting a Zach Taylor, Kyle Shanahan, McVay disciple to run your team? Like, I'm just never going to be like, whoa.
We don't know. We're working with such limited information, and like all you can do is evaluate the organization's process. Do you trust these decision makers? Do you think that they are making sound strategic decisions rather than... I don't know any of these people personally. I know the Michigan guys a little bit better than the others for obvious reasons. and like everything else is just like, who knows? Maybe.
Yeah, 100%. Who knows? Maybe. That's a great way of ending the Atlanta Falcons hour here on the Atlanta Sports Guy. Garrett, miss you this week. Max, thank you as always, my friend. And let's talk again. Maybe next week, a reaction show, depending on what happens here with the Atlanta Falcons. But Max, thank you as always, and I'll talk to you very soon.